The Strengthening Communities podcast is brought to you by Access Services. Join us as we talk with Patrick Walsh and Eli Wenger from Martha's Choice, as well as Penny Johnson from HopeWorks.
Welcome to our podcast today. Today we're going to be talking about hunger in the community and what's that about. And I think there's a lot of things that maybe people just at large or the public don't necessarily understand about the increasing issue of hunger in our communities. And so we're going to talk about that today. And then next month we'll do part 2 where we talk about homelessness and the impact that has on our community, particularly at this time of year when it's really cold. Let's start with you, Eli and Patrick. You guys are the directors over at Martha's Choice Pantry. Do you want to talk a little bit about sort of what that is? And then we'll get into sort of what you're seeing in the world of hunger and food insecurity.
Sure. Martha's Choice Marketplace and Community Farm is a large pantry in Montgomery County. We serve large amount of families that come to us from all over the place. But I think, certainly in general, majority of a 10-mile radius here around Norristown. And our mission is to build community through access to healthy food. And we do that with a really broad team of volunteers from kind of all walks of life, both here and at the farm. As well as our staff and our community of partners, folks like yourself, Penny. Penny helped us, pilot some of our main inaugural programs back almost 10 years ago now. That's kind of scary to realize. So that's a little bit of a broad overview. Eli, would you add anything to that or?
Yeah, I think. The way Martha's is set up, obviously we're a food pantry and this year we'll serve somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.8 million pounds of food to about 4,500 families, about 20,000 individuals, 8,000 children in our area. Obviously people come to us specifically for food, but within that is the ability to grow community. People get to know one another from very different backgrounds. People get to come together around food, both the guests that we serve and the volunteers that are part of our programs. And the goal there is not simply to feed people, although that is obviously the foremost goal, but also to kind of try to break down barriers that exist between people through not knowing one another, and coming together around food allows people to break down some of those walls, get to know each other, and form relationships and understanding in ways that really kind of expose that myth on a certain kind of level and allow us to find commonality.
Yeah. You guys, the numbers are pretty staggering to me, to the sort of the uninitiated perhaps, but have you seen, how's this been trending?
I'm trying to remember what it was like to be on the outside of the world of a food pantry. I don't even think I knew about food pantries before coming into this job. Sadly, that's like embarrassing to admit. But the people who come to us for help are from a very broad spectrum of places. I mean, you might have somebody who is, working 1, 2, 3 jobs and still really struggling to make ends meet. You could have somebody who is currently working full time for the federal government and not getting paid at all. You could have also people who are dealing with dangerous levels of destitution and living outside and facing the elements. We're like this nexus point of so many places, so many different types of living situations and families and backgrounds. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity there to connect people and to help them realize that that everybody needs something, everybody has something to give. You know, we say that the reason that we do all of this is because everybody deserves love and everybody has love to give, right? And people do that in different ways. So we try to have Martha's be a place where people can do that in a lot of different ways.
I think, you mentioned, employees of the federal government, so, people who aren't, usually get paid and aren't getting paid. I think the issue of the SNAP benefits has sort of brought this been a sort of a lightning rod for conversation for lots of folks in the public, because of, the sudden need that people have. So there's sort of a two-part question. The first is, how has that situation impacted you guys, in the most recent, last couple of weeks or a month? Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, so this, Patrick and I talk about how, like, we were already in the midst of a very serious food crisis. The past 12 months at Martha's have been the busiest 12 months by far in the last 10 years. So we have a little chart of like the monthly numbers, and they're color coded in terms of how busy they are, and the last 12 months are just deep, dark red. Just state of emergency level need, in our community. And then November started, and those numbers, grew by 70-80%. So for example, an average week we we'll do about maybe between 450 500 families, and that's a busy week. It's almost 2,000 guests per month. Then we're doing 700. So all of a sudden it's just like, that number just skyrockets. And at least in the first week of November, we're open 3 days a week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And all 3 days we had to shut down the operation early, which we've done that maybe twice in 10 years. All 3 days we had to do that because we were simply out of food. There was no more food. And we're turning away car after car. So, we did close to 700 guests. We could have done 900. The longer we would have been open, people would have been coming. And so that is obviously a level of concern that we never experienced before.
I was going to say, that's amazing that the percentages are so much higher, and you still see a need that you can't meet because of the lack of supply. What has been some of the response or some of the things that you guys are putting in place to try to meet that demand?
Yeah, we've obviously been sounding the alarm to anybody that will listen, trying to strike a delicate balance between being, optimistically alarmist and also just honest about the immediacy and urgency of that need. So it has been tremendously heartening to see a lot of community response, which indicates to me that I think it may just simply be something that a lot of people do not realize. I think that's really true, because it's not as if we're suddenly convincing people that there's folks that need your help. People just simply may not be aware. I think that it may not be real, for people in a way. And this terrible crisis, I think, put it on people's radar and maybe perhaps made it real for them. So many people are supported by SNAP. And so I would imagine people are organically realizing this just because of the connections within their own lives of people who this is affecting. And we have seen a tremendous outpouring of support. So we're trying to figure out how to continue that momentum and help people build on that to maybe an even more meaningful level that I think is maybe what you guys were kind of getting at, at the onset here, about how, like, we as a community are trying to respond to other human beings as other human beings. It's dark because there are these like material emergencies of people don't have enough money for food. People are getting evicted from their homes because it's just, the math is just not adding up. But I think also we're just I don't know. I think we do life in a really painful way as communities, because we're so isolated from each other. And at the food pantry, it's actually a really great blessing. It's exhausting and it's crazy, but to be able to see the best in people so often, like to be able to come and see a place where people are like they're kind of opening their hearts to other people. It's very vulnerable to come and receive help, like because you hope that you'll be received with dignity and love and respect, and you're not sure if you will. And it's also very vulnerable to give help, because you're dealing with people who you might not understand. You might have questions. You might be afraid. I don't know, whatever it is. Both of those things are places where people are kind of opening up their hearts in a vulnerable way, and connecting in that way is really beautiful. And I think it's a deep feeling that people need.
Yeah, you've said it a couple different ways, but I'm really struck by this idea that it's relief, and we need to give relief to folks, but it's beyond transactional. Like people could come and get a thing, and it's so fundamental and visceral. I need food, but really, you guys are trying to be a hub where people are connected. This is a relational space, a hub space where it's relational in nature, and it's people connecting around something as important as food, but it impacts us in a relational way when people enter into that space. And so I'm just wondering, how does it impact? Like, how have you seen volunteers who come say, I think I'm going to help somebody else. Maybe I view them as less fortunate. Maybe I just see this as a sort of a task that I'm doing to volunteer, and then I find out that this is another person, or I'm introduced to the life of somebody else. And how do you see that impacting the folks who come to help?
It happens every day. It happens at different levels every day. It happens in small moments, and it happens in epic gestures, like with equal amounts of unpredictability and holy cow. I think a good example is we have a gentleman who comes to us who had a fairly severe brain injury several years ago, and he's a sweetheart. He comes, helps, just in ways that he can. And he can never remember when the pantry's open, so he just comes when he's nearby, rides a bike, and we give him what he can carry that day, and that's just the nature of our relationship in a lot of ways. He just happened to stop by last year. We were having a volunteer Christmas party, and celebrating, and he just stops by because he sees cars, like, hey, I could use some food, and so he hung out for basically the remainder of the party. Through that hanging out, it was learned that he was again living in the woods. This is, December, so we're talking about very cold. So one of our volunteers, put him up for a week at a nearby kind of like hotel. And then another volunteer put him up for another week. And then another volunteer put him up for another week. And then so on down the road for close to 6 months, different volunteers and different people basically came through and helped him have shelter, for the better part of, well, certainly all of the winter into the spring, when it, kind of got warmer again. And then he was by his own kind of, wanting to kind of get back, to his own life. But we got him through the winter, and that was just volunteers stepping up, seeing someone that they recognized as being a frequent guest, but also then learning more about the story and going to the next level of helping take care of him. And things like that happen, I don't know, on a fairly regular basis, again, in small and epic ways that really change people's lives. And it starts, I think, on some kind of level with having a relationship with the person, seeing that person as part of your community, seeing that person as the same as you on so many different levels, and then realizing that there's something you can do to better their lives. That I don't know, magical things happen.
Yeah, magical things happen is a great example of when you create space and people just come into that space. They learn about each other. They start being human with each other, and then things come out of that that you hadn't planned, and it's not transactional anymore. It just comes out of relationship. Penny, you wanted to weigh in on something here, I think. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, so first of all, Patrick and Eli, it's great to see you guys. I know it's been a few years. So yeah, I went away and like when Patrick and Eli talk about, how people kind of come together. I know, I've been on both ends of the spectrum. I was, a chef and then I became homeless. The food pantry was a huge thing. Um, for me, even when I got back into, my apartment, and no longer had to use the soup kitchens. And I found so many amazing people that I would not have met. I started volunteering there myself because I wanted to give back to the people who helped me out. And, it opened up so many doors and it helped me to see a lot of people in a very different light. Um, being homeless, sometimes, you get the sense of, oh, people are volunteering so they feel good about themselves. And it's not that, you know what I mean? They genuinely care about what's going on and what they can do to help in the community. And just from being there, you start to see a pattern. And I know we're going to get into it more a little bit later, but you see a pattern of people wanting specific things. And I think that's because generationally, they're used to those things. And I wish, more and more people are starting to realize that the food pantries have so much more to offer, than just the usual things that they have eaten, and it's just a matter of opening up the doors to those different items or the fresh produce and stuff like that, and showing people how to use those items. It just, it gave me a sense of purpose in my darkest time. So it really was eye-opening and a beautiful thing.
Penny, I want to I want to follow up with that too. When you and I first met, and I don't remember exactly when that was, but you had experienced being unhoused for a while, and then you were also we were talking about food, specifically like how do you find food when you're living outside? You said, you live in Norristown, and when you were outside in Norristown, you said I could find something to eat, but then you said, you could live outside and gain weight in Norristown because there's lots of food that you can find around. It's available. But then you went on to say, but it's pastries and bread and all these things. But it's really hard to find nutritional food and as a person who's outside and also doesn't have a lot of space to, doesn't have a lot of ways to cook food. And then the thing you said was like eggs. Try finding eggs. And you were talking about just how important eggs are, and I have not thought about that. So it changed me. And when I started, I was doing outreach and doing encampments at that point of time, and so I started bringing hard-boiled eggs with me. And the thing that happened when I did that, everybody was like, "Wow, an egg! You would have thought it was like gold or something." Just those little things about. What the experience is like of trying to find food, but also how do you find food that you can use, and then how do you find food that's nourishing or healthy at the same time. So that I just want you to sort of talk a little bit about that because that changed me the way I thought about it.
Sure, no problem. As I said, when I was experiencing, homelessness, I said it lightheartedly, but it was true. I was blessed to be, if anybody can say they were blessed to be homeless, no, I was blessed to be homeless in Norristown because there were a lot of soup kitchens. But like I said, every time when you go into one, you're utterly grateful for everything that they have, everything that's been donated. But yeah, a lot of times, it's breads or toast or pastries, which, is great. But, myself, I'm diabetic. So, could only imagine someone, who can't have gluten, how they would feel. So you're grateful for everything, but it's hard to find the things, especially when you have special needs or restrictions, to find the different things. And a lot of the stuff, where I was volunteering at, I was actually volunteering at a soup kitchen while I was homeless because, again, like I wanted to find a way to take the things that were donated and maybe add to them and give them some type of better taste or nutritional value because, first of all, just because someone is experiencing homelessness doesn't mean they should just accept whatever's there. I know a lot of people say people need to be grateful, and we are, you know, um, but we have taste, we have restrictions, we have likes. Um, a lot of times pasta was donated, rices, which is great. But, like I was telling Mark, if we could just get somebody to bring eggs, you can add eggs to anything, you know, give people more protein, more fiber, it was hard to figure out not just how to get those things, but then how to introduce those to a lot of people, especially, not even just people who are unhoused. They may not have a way to cook things, but even people who are going to food pantries, a lot of people, they don't know, what a rutabaga is, what a squash is, or how to cook it, um, which makes people afraid to even try it. So, you know, because I also had experiences, as a chef, to me, it was like, okay, this is what I can do to help. This is what I can give back. And that's, I got introduced to Patrick and Eli there, and they had this great program where they wanted to teach people how to use these things. And so I got involved in that. And it's funny because sometimes you can't tell people what it is they're trying because they're not going to try it. um, but once they do, then they're like, I had no idea that, you could do this. But it also helped open up, what I was doing at the soup kitchen because I was able to get a lot of these items that don't get donated to soup kitchens from the pantry and, introduce them to give people healthier meals, at the soup kitchen.
I just wanted to share a little bit about some of the things that Penny did for us, in the early days. The biggest job was leading our little co-op of 15 families that would come to the food pantry. And the idea was that they'd be able to run their own opening, which we thought was a really cool idea because it's ownership over what's happening. And at the time, there was this bountiful, blessed overabundance of fresh produce that we did actually need to figure out a way to metabolize. And so the group would package that up and use some of it and have it, and we'd have it packaged up for the opening later that day for a very large amount of families. And I think what was so special about the work that Penny was doing was that bringing together these 15 families from various backgrounds to do this work / for each other / for themselves and for the program in general required a ton of patience and love and compassion and balancing having your eyes out for potential interpersonal conflict, but also bridging that with grace and it was masterful. And we so greatly appreciate that work that she was doing, because I think that even in spite of, or maybe even because of the times that we struck out, we just couldn't quite bridge a gap or what have you, this constant wellspring of love and care and seeing people as friends with names, that certainly that transforms everybody involved, right? The receiver of that is transformed. You're transformed. It's the actual work, I think, of helping to nourish each other, on a deeper level, which is, I think, absolutely necessary. It's like to use a farm metaphor. It's like, we could just shove tons of fertilizer into the ground and then just extract it violently every single year, or for probably a little bit more initial investment, but a lot more care and attention and I don't know, almost like tenderness and patience, we could cultivate soil that is alive. And I think that's what, a community that is nourished with care and attention and seeing people as people is like that's a soil that's alive. I have a quote I'll end with this little digression, but I want to read it to you. It's so important to me that I have it on the wall. It says, "Do not depend on the hope of results. You may have to face the fact that your work will be apparently worthless and even achieve no result at all, if not perhaps results opposite to what you expect. As you get used to this idea, you start more and more to concentrate not on the results, but on the value, the rightness, the truth of the work itself. You gradually struggle less and less for an idea and more for specific people. In the end, it's the reality of personal relationship that saves everything."
And that's, as we've been doing these podcasts, the thing that occurs to me is, we speak with a lot of people who are very proximate to the work in the community. And I think of the different places where I've been proximate in my work and the purpose that I've found in that. And you're right, it's humans helping humans, and putting a name to the person you see, like, because it's so striking to me that we're all in the same community, but we're not proximate to each other when it comes to meeting needs. So you're finding the door opens up due to hunger, but you're not just solving the hunger problem. You're solving a whole person. You're helping someone through your own experience and through understanding what good support has looked like for you, and also saying, I believe in this person, I see the best in this person, and I want to, and understanding the vulnerability that it takes for someone to come there. And I think as we're doing these, and I think all of us would probably admit, due to our work, however we found our way here, we're very fortunate to be proximate. And there might be somebody listening who's not proximate right now, and maybe sees someone who might be in need, but they don't know a name. They don't have the door that's going to open up to that conversation. And I know, Patrick, you mentioned that before you got started with this work, you hadn't been involved in food pantries before, or understood what that was like. So what kind of advice would you have to people, just a community member, your neighbor, uncle, cousin, whoever, who was looking to get more proximate, whether it was in this capacity or some other way, just to give back to their neighbor, or to be more proximate to the people around them, to help kind of bring a blanket of support around their folks?
I mean, ultimately, an analogy that I always come back to is when the Eagles win or whatever it is, it's amazing how everyone on the street is your best friend. You just walk down the streets, and all the people that on any other day of the week you're ignoring, or you're walking past, or may even be a nuisance to you on some kind of level. All of a sudden the Eagles win, and you're hugging them, and you're all on the same side, amazingly, in that moment. And so the ability to be on the same side of people is obviously very real, and we're all capable of doing it. But to Patrick's point, it requires a vulnerability of going to a place where you let the community into you. You know what I mean? And that it's a risky place to be, because now you have to deal with yourself. Now you have to deal with your bias. Now you have to deal with your judgment. Now you have to deal with all the things that you're not necessarily at peace within yourself with, and you're projecting on other people, or they on some kind of level represent to you, or whatever. All the big things that are in your own kind of self, that when you're going into working with people that are very different from you, that are maybe I don't know, struggling, all that kind of thing, you now have to engage with that part of you. And so it's a tough place, but when the right situation presents itself, and I think something like a food pantry is that kind of situation, where you enter in and you are now in the midst of all these different kind of people that resemble all these different things about yourself and all that kind of stuff, happens slowly over time. It's a slow burn that you slowly start to come around to what you're going through, what they're going through. And again, to go back to that earlier thing, you start to see the commonality. You start to see like, wait, these are people just like me, man. They're going through things just like me. And then you start to share inside jokes. And so now that you share inside jokes just like me, you start to bridge that gap between all the things that you keep within yourself and that you separate into the rest of the world. Those things start to mingle. And it's, I think initially maybe a little bit of a whoo, that's like hot sauce. Like, whoo, I didn't see that coming. But once you acquire a taste for it, it's like, wow, this makes everything better. That now I'm in touch with this part of myself. I'm in touch with these people. Like I'm a broader person. I'm a wider person. I'm a deeper person. Those things happen in a very, very magical way. And Patrick and I always talk about how on a daily basis, we are on some kind of level transformed by the people around us. And that's not like, I think to Penny's point, it's not like, they're like, oh, look at these people suffering and I'm doing so much better. And that's what makes me feel good about this. No, it's not that. It's the broadening of self. It's the engaging with self through others. It's the engaging of others through self that widens you, that deepens you, that broadens you. And now you are a richer human as a result. And that's where I think this I don't know, change of self and transformation occurs that is tremendously beautiful and is also, I think, on a certain level, permanent. Once you open that door, the door is open now. Like you can no longer pretend that door isn't there, and I think it grows within you from that point on.
So inspiring to think that we're all just one Eagles Super Bowl win away from transcendent oneness. That's very heartening. But really, I think that it's a positive feedback loop. Once someone receives kindness or feels seen or cared about in some type of way, right? Like that, there's like an immediate ability, to then respond in kind. Like that's a very real thing. Like that's not just like, something that, a nice thing to think about, but like, it's very real, people receive that gift from somebody else and kind of like compelled to give it out again. I think that's awesome. At least that's what I get to see.
Yeah, I think it at times, I think people are looking at the relationship as a giver of help and a receiver of help, when in fact, it is just a relationship where you're both in a reciprocal process of giving and receiving. And then you're just engaged in this thing, which is just life. And it doesn't become this, I'm here showing up to help you or you're showing up. You find yourself like, oh, I really hope I run into this person today. I hope I get to see. And I've said, and it's usually come on like post podcast because I get a little more free and loose, but I'm like, I'd probably gain so much more than any of the people I've been trying to support. Like I think of what that's done for me, but also I just like to think that I'm more engaged with different parts of my community, and I'm so thankful that I'm introduced to people in different ways. And this podcast is another example of that. Like I feel like Mark is just, I'm getting introduced to so many great people on this podcast, and then you look for opportunities like where in these relationships can I insert myself to learn more about something or be more helpful here or there, and you just broaden your circle. And I think that's what everybody needs when you're talking about strength in communities, is just broadening your circle. Everybody's got something to offer, something to bring to the table. And it's so nice when you see, like hearing Penny say she was fortunate to be homeless in Norristown. And I'm like, damn it, that inspires me. Like, I'm not doing enough. I'm complaining about I didn't have good coffee like last week, and I got to put some things in perspective here. So that it's so inspiring. It's awesome.
We talk about authentic relationships, and what I think we mean by that is there's the initial relationship of a person that comes to you for the first time and how you perceive them and how they perceive you and all that kind of stuff. But over time, the relationship starts to be like actually just like, kind of to what you were saying, like you're looking forward to seeing this person, not because of what they represent. you know what I mean, or anything like that, because of who they are. But it's based on knowing each other and not some abstract either judgment or how we kind of are represented within our community, but who we actually are, you know, and you get to know each other on that level, and that's where we can really connect.
It's those Giants fans you don't want to see, Eli. That's what you're really saying, right?
So yeah, I was just gonna say, Tyler, back to, when you say it's a relationship, it truly is. And I think the hardest part for anyone, is being able to show their vulnerability. But that's key to opening up a relationship with people. They come in, if people are struggling, they come in, they automatically, they're either feeling embarrassed or ashamed. They assume that, people around them are going to judge them. So sometimes you have to open up your own vulnerability and, make that person realize that, hey, I get it. I understand where you're coming from. That vulnerability is what opens up those doors to relationships, and not just relationships, but I think the thing that I love the most, like when Patrick was talking about the 15 different families, we all came together to this thing. Not only were we trying to help the pantry, by volunteering and doing this, but we started merging cultures, which was a beautiful thing. So, now you're taking, just when it comes to food, you're taking food and recipes that you're used to and you're merging it with this other culture. And it's just, diversity is what makes humanity possible, in my opinion. If you're not capable of opening yourself up to diversity, then you're not going to be able to open up relationships with people. So I know, Eli was, talking about too, sometimes there's a certain person that you can't wait to see. So obviously we don't mention names, but one in particular for me was a much elderly gentleman who was part of the coup. And I know a lot of times, even Patrick Eli, oh, it's such and such here. Yeah. I love to see him because the second he walked in the door, I would start cracking jokes. You know what I mean? And he was just such a different person when once he walked through those doors and we started joking with each other. He became a very pleasant person rather than, a very older gentleman who was difficult to be around. So it's all about connecting with people and finding what brings out the best in them. And I think a lot of times I learn more about myself even from, connecting with other people. So it really is, it's just a beautiful thing, to be in a space where you can be vulnerable and help others to be vulnerable as well. So
It feels like we started this conversation with maybe like how many canned goods do you need at the food pantry, and we've just sort of blossomed out into sort of this is partly about food and people who need it, but it's mostly about how do we relate to each other and how the opportunity to come together around food, which is such a sort of a basic ingredient of life. And so when we share a table or we extend a table in that way, how our communities just get so much better. We get so much better because we're just sharing ourselves around this just basic fundamental need that we all have around food. But it's not just being fed, it's how do we share food. And so this has been a really, I think a conversation right along the lines of what we want to promote in the community is how do we come together? How do we get stronger together by just looking out for each other and maybe discovering things about ourselves that we hadn't really thought of before. I just want to shift a little bit in just for a minute or two to food itself. I mean, you guys at Martha's also have a garden, and Patrick, you were using the metaphor of growing things, and so I just wanted to a couple things that maybe people don't think about, but are just striking statistics for me. One is that the average distance that a meal travels to get onto our plate is 1,500 miles. And so it just we get food from all sorts of places because we can, because there's transportation and there's refrigeration and all that. But it takes away a little bit from just our connection to food that comes from our local space. And then the other statistic that strikes me is that we throw away 40% of our food. And so it just feels like when you think about all of this from the food's point of view, like there's food that doesn't go where it needs to go, and there's food that gets thrown out. And sort of what thoughts do you guys have around how maybe as a member of the public I can just be a little bit more aware, or shift my thinking about my relationship to food a little bit that helps that, and then maybe helps you guys at a pantry?
That's an awesome question. I think, I mean, for everybody to certainly try to eat more locally, grow your own food if you can, or help other people, grow it. I think that like just the act of that is really meaningful. It reminds us of what it is that we should be getting closer to. I think all of these things, food pantries, communities of people who are helping one another, local farms. This is all like, these are examples of like what would be better than what we've got, and what is clearly not working. And so by participating in those things, first of all, they're just fun to participate in, it's almost like art, right? I don't know what the data on how art improves your life is, but I think it's pretty self-evident that that gardening, growing food with other people, thinking about the land that you're on, thinking about the other people that are inhabiting that with you is inherently good things. It's gonna make you feel good. So growing your own food, eating locally if you can, for people who have the capacity to be supporting local farms, on purpose. Like, I think that's so important because, I don't know, you could drag economists in here to explain how like the way that we do food doesn't make sense at all, that it takes 1,500 miles for food to get to a plate. It's just tremendously unsustainable, inefficient, and, also destructive to the earth. But by doing these things, there are things we can do. Like, we can love each other. We can be generous with our spirit. We can grow food somewhere near our house. We can help people that are doing that. There are actually a lot of farms that are growing food for food pantries. There are quite a few in the immediate area. Anybody could get involved in volunteering at and helping at those. Those are all things that people could begin doing, immediately.
Thank you guys so much for joining us and talking us through that. Mike, any last shots there? Anything else to say?
No, it occurred to me, like I'm thinking, and kind of when we were talking about the food itself and whether it's, getting food that's nourishing, and Penny talked about eggs, and I think a lot of people, especially myself with not a lot of experience with food pantries, I would think that things that should be donated would be things with a longer shelf life, right? Like, which are those things that generally aren't very nourishing. So I think what sounds like also an important message is, because the need is so high, I would imagine there's a quick turnaround on fresh foods and things like that. Is that the case? Is that accurate, that you're looking for donations of fresh fruits, vegetables, perishables, things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, meat frozen is helpful, right? To have it frozen and not refrigerated. But essentially, all the food, it's like the tide. All the food comes in and then all the food goes out, and that happens very quickly. So it is a very quick turnaround, and we welcome donations of frozen meat that are within date and everything. So I absolutely, that can be very helpful.
Asking folks for money is not always the easiest thing, but we can purchase things at costs that, you can go buy a chicken breast and make a donation. That's great. But we could probably purchase 10 for the price of the one that you purchase and feed 10 additional people. So that is something where an actual financial donation can be something that really does have a much more impactful kind of result.
But that's helpful to know that your contribution can go farther if you give money and let you guys just figure out what you need in that day. Penny, what else do you have to say here?
So I was gonna say too, like, I tell people here that, they a lot of times they do donate non-perishables to food pantries. And I tell them before you donate something, put it in your hand. Think about how do you make this at home? Is this going to be something that somebody can just use? Like if you have a box of macaroni and cheese you're going to donate, think what else is that person going to need to make that a meal, and try to donate those things together.
A lot of times people donate like hamburger helper, and it's just like, wow, thank you. There's all these other ingredients that are necessary. Just the box won't succeed,
I wanted to say one other last answer to your question, Mark, about like what could people do, is kind of like Mike was saying, to get proximal to other people. Figure out some way to do that, either whether it's volunteering or going and listening. Figure out some way you can help, or just opening up your eyes as you move through your community, to see need, and to be open to to getting to know people. I mean, I think that's also super, super key. Yeah.
Well, next month, we're going to continue in part 2, where we talk about the situation of housing and homelessness, and how that's also one of those spaces where there's a lot of need. It's become a crisis in our communities, and how there's lots of things that we can do as a community to work towards solutions when we do that together. So thank you guys for being with us today.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope that you enjoyed hearing from people who are strengthening our communities every day. Search for and follow us on your preferred streaming platform to hear future episodes.